inventory keeps rising in the Phoenix area. In fact, we have 44% more active listings on the market today than we did last year at this time. We're going to talk about that. Also, you may be surprised to see some of the price increases we've had year over year and how Phoenix is ranking on a new list for home buyers. So let's get into it. I hope you all like my new background. I am finally dialed in here in my home office and excited to be with you guys for another weekly market update. So let's talk about what's going on with inventory. According to the Cromford report, there is 44% more single-family detached listings available for sale in Greater Phoenix than we had 1 year ago. However, there is a difference amongst the price ranges. So we're actually seeing in the lower price ranges, there is more inventory than the higher price ranges, which makes sense because if you remember a few weeks back, I was talking about how the luxury market is super, super hot. Well, part of that has to do with the fact that the inventory is lower in that bracket of the market. So under 350,000, we have 70% more active listings on the market than we did a year ago. Between 350 to 600,000, we have 51% more active listings than a year ago. Between the price range of 600 to a million, 38% more. Between 1 million to 3 million, 27% more. Between 3 million to 7.5 million, we have 21% more. And over 7.5 million, we have 4% fewer than a year ago. So across pretty much all price ranges, except for that 7.5 million mark, we are seeing more inventory by at least 20% more than we had last year at this time. So what does that mean if you're a seller? Well, it means you have more competition out there. It means that you don't have as much negotiating power when there are other listings on the market that buyers can choose from. And then we also have to talk about what's going on with buyers right now, because although rates have gone down, we're just still not seeing that buyer demand make a turn for this spring buying season that we typically see. So when you're a seller on the market, you don't have a ton of buyers looking at your property. You also have some competition from other listings out there, which means you may need to be a little bit more negotiable. So let's look at what's going on with active listings. We've been tracking this every single week. Here we are this week at 24,323 active listings on the market. As you can see, 2025 is a pretty big difference from previous years. As we know now, 44% higher. But if you look at just what the 2025 line looks like as we've started the year, we had this small kind of taper off dip for a second there, and then started to see active listings hitting the market once again very quickly. Now, I also want to take a look at the new listings coming on the market, because it's important to factor in, how many active we have as a whole, but also how many of those are actually new coming on the market on a weekly basis. So for new listings, we're seeing last month, we outpaced the past 2 years. 9,759 new listings came on the market in February. Last year, we had 8,430. The year before, we had 7,318. This month so far, we're sitting at 2,823. So too soon to tell. We're very beginning of March right now. So I'm not sure if we're going to see this listing number outpace what we've done in the previous years, but as the trend has been going, I feel like it's reasonable to expect that we will see us outpace previous years with our new listings as well. Now, one of the things we've been looking at is the listings going under contract, because this helps us understand what the buyer demand is. If we aren't seeing a lot of listings going under contract every single week, then that means that there aren't a lot of buyers out there making offers on properties. But if we do see that number starting to tick up, that means there is some buyer activity out there. So the good news for sellers is that the buyer activity exists. Okay. It's kind of hard to see this darker grayish line. I don't know, brown maybe. I guess I'm colorblind. I think it's brown. This is 2025 and clearly on pace with 2024. If I can remove 2024, we can see this a little bit better. But we have seen an upward trend. We have flattened out the last few weeks. And this is surprising to me because not only have mortgage rates gone down over the last few weeks, but also now is the peak time for buyers to be coming out of the woodwork in the Phoenix area. So I'm very curious to follow this and see how this trend continues, because I would have expected to see this line continuing to go up a little bit faster. So if you're a seller out there wondering how these stats are going to affect your ability to sell, just curious what your home might be worth, check the description. I have a link for an instant home valuation that'll just give you some indication on what your home could sell for. Now, last week we got the jobs report. Why do we care? Because this can affect mortgage rates. And this article talks about how the Fed reacted to the February jobs report. Basically, what happened was unemployment rate ticked up to 4.1% from 4%. We also saw the labor force participation rate fell from 62.6% to 62.4%. And then a few other things came out, but basically the key takeaways: we added 151,000 jobs in February. The expectations were 168,000. So it talks a little bit about how the Fed reacts to this report, saying that the Fed is likely to hold off on further decreases in interest rates in the near term as it assesses the strength of the U.S. economy with the backdrop of the heightened fiscal policy uncertainty. Before the upcoming Fed meeting, that's going to be March 18th and 19th, the Fed will pay close attention to the next consumer price index. So we got some inflation readings coming on March 12th, and monitor inflation's progress towards the 2% goal. So inflation was a very hot topic for the Fed for a while. Now they are looking much more at the labor market. We continue to see some softening in the labor market, but not that the labor market is breaking. And until we see indication of that in these jobs reports, the Fed is probably not going to be in much of a rush to cut the federal funds rate. Now, we all know the federal funds rate is not the mortgage interest rate. However, what the Fed does, their commentary, all of that affects the markets, which then will affect mortgage rates. So where do we stand with rates? Well, rates have fallen to their lowest point this year, while markets are spooked on economic growth and sour consumer sentiment. We've actually seen rates go down the last few weeks, which is great news for buyers. Where we stand today, we're around 6.72%, finally got under 7%. We got all the way to 6.7, had a little bit of a spike, back down. But, from where we were at back in the beginning of February, about a month ago, we were over 7%. So to see us get under 7 and actually even kind of getting closer to the 6.5 range, that's pretty encouraging for buyers. So Mortgage News Daily is talking about what happened last week. Basically, we saw that rates hit their lowest levels in months last Tuesday. And then we ended up seeing rates rising steadily for the next 2 days, finally leveled off on Friday. So there was some volatility last week. If you're out there as a buyer and kind of wondering how this is going to affect your payment, make sure you're in touch with your lender, just because things have shifted a little bit over the last few weeks. And prior to that, we weren't seeing much change at all. So you may want to check in with them and see how that may affect your mortgage payment and kind of what you're anticipating. Now, I said you might be surprised to hear some new stats that came in about the Phoenix area, according to this article regarding homeownership. And I want to share that with you. But first, if any of this is helpful, make sure you consider subscribing. I'm almost at 10K subscribers, and share this with someone who might be interested or find it helpful. So this article from the Phoenix Business Journal: homebuyers face a surge of challenges. These cities are defying the odds. So it goes on to talk about a few cities that are seeing a lot of home buying activity, and the home ownership numbers have increased over the years. And Phoenix is on the list, but not only Phoenix, a few cities within the metro area actually are making this list. Of the 10 large cities with the highest homeownership rates, 4 were in Arizona. Gilbert at 70%, Chandler at 68%, Scottsdale at 66%, and Mesa at 66.2%. The national average was 65.2%. So showing growth over time, that we've continued to get folks buying homes here and owning property in the Arizona, in the Phoenix metro area, whereas there are some other cities that are seeing a lot of people leaving the area and or not able to purchase there and renting instead. So this is showing the percentage of owner-occupied homes in these particular cities and comparing it 2024 to how many were occupied 5 years ago, what that difference is, and then versus 10 years ago. So we've seen a 1% increase for Chandler year over year. And then if we look back to 10 years ago, there's been a 10% increase in the number of owner occupants in Chandler. If we look at Scottsdale year over year, they're actually down 1%, but over 10 years, 1.3% increase. For Mesa, we've seen 3.2% increase year over year and 7.1% increase over the last 10 years. So while there is a lot of talk about Phoenix being an unaffordable place to live, we are seeing this increase in home ownership. And I'm not going to say that prices are completely achievable for everyone, but what we have to keep in mind is when we look at the income required to purchase a home, most of the time we're seeing a 2-income household being able to purchase a home together. So that income requirement isn't always just on the shoulders of one person. When you have 2 people coming together with an income, they are more likely able to afford a home in the area. So I also wanted to share the affidavits of value that just came out for Maricopa from January, and this is showing some pretty surprising increases across the board. So we're seeing that there were 6,000 closed transactions in January, which is up 1.1% from February of 2024, so essentially a year ago. There were 1,283 closed new homes, which is down 4.6% from February of 2024, but there were 4,717 closed resale transactions, which was up 2.8% from February of 2024. So we did see more resale transactions closed this year compared to last year when we're looking at February of 2024. The overall median sales price in February was $488,613, which is up 4.6% from last year. The new home median is up 2.7% from February of last year, and the resale median is up 4.4% from February of last year. So both resale and new home sales have had an increase in their price year over year. So although our buyer demand isn't quite keeping up with supply, we're seeing increasing supply, and we have low transaction volumes, we're still seeing this increase in prices year over year for both new construction and resale homes. Now, if we look at the CMI, which we've been taking a look at every single week, any number between 90 to 110 is considered balanced, and we're at 83.1 today. So still in this buyer's market, and this has been looking a little bit weaker every single week. Our demand is at 79.9, so about 20% below normal. Supply 96.1, so only about 4% below normal. This continues to climb while demand is very slowly trying to keep up with supply. If we look at all the major cities and their respective CMI, you see a lot of red arrows on this list. Now, the average change in the CMI month over month is negative 2.3% this week. Last week, we saw negative 5.2%. So we are seeing a slowdown in the movement towards a buyer's market, although we're seeing a lot of red arrows. When we look all together, this change has slowed down a little bit, which is the second week in a row we've seen that start to slow down. So don't be fooled by the red arrows. There is a possibility that we are starting to swing in that direction, maybe slow down going into a buyer's market and possibly starting to move into a balanced market. But time will tell. I mean, we saw where those active listing numbers are. We saw where that listings under contract is. I thought we would be seeing a little bit more activity by this time in the year. Now let's look at the contract ratio, which is a little bit more real time because it's measuring the number of listings as compared to how many of those listings are actually under contract. And we actually saw a decrease, very, very slight, but a decrease in the contract ratio week to week. So 2 weeks ago, we were at 36.2. This last week, we were at 36.0. Typically, like if we go back here, what we start to see is an increase in this contract ratio week to week, especially as we get into the spring market. So if we're looking at 2024, week 9, we were at 52 on the contract ratio, and we were continuing to increase here as we got into spring. So kind of interesting that we saw, even though it was a very slightly lower number, it was just a bit lower this week compared to last week. Now, if we look at the contract ratio heat map, we do see a few zip codes that are a little bit warmer in the West Valley and then in Chandler. This one has remained to be one of the hottest zip codes we've had. I don't know why all of these are not showing up in various colors. It seems like their map isn't loading today for some reason, so I apologize. But we can at least see the areas that are a little bit warmer, which has been tracking with what we've seen week to week. Now, sellers, like I said, if you're just curious what your home value could be, check that description below for a link to an instant home valuation. I can also share with you the months of supply in your city, which is going to help you understand what that competition looks like in your area and how many homes are on the market if you are considering listing. Now, buyers, that information is helpful for you too, because if you are targeting a particular city, you want to know what the months of supply looks like, whether or not you have an advantage with a lot of things to choose from, or if inventory is a bit lower. So check the description if you want that information. I will be back next week with another market update.